Most players see Gielinor as a game of loud triumphs, the roar of a boss, the firework display of a level up, the chaos of a crowded bank, but Gielinor is at its most honest when it is quiet. Behind the mechanics of grinding lies a world built on examined text, long-lost scriptures, and hidden environmental details, often overlooked, yet they are witness to thousands of years of history. And so today, we aren't looking at the bosses you've fought or the items that you've earned. We are looking at the details that you have walked past for decades, the quiet evidence of a world that was already old before you ever arrived. Chapter 1: The Smashing Truth of Senntisten. Most people think the examined text in Old School RuneScape is just for flavor or bad puns. Take the ceramic remains you find while cleaning specimens in the dig site. The examined text is a single word: smashing. It's a classic Jagex joke, a pun on the fact that you're looking at broken pottery. But if you stop there, you are missing the point. That little joke is the final, trivialized remnant of two different civilizations that were buried, one on top of the other, in the dirt south of Varrock. Before and during the height of the God Wars, this wasn't just a dig site. No, it was Senntisten, the capital of the Zerosian Empire. In the Second Age, it was the largest and most important city in Gielinor. For several millennia, it withstood constant sieges from both Zamorakian and Saradomin forces. This was until the Third Age, when the Zamorakians finally breached the walls. The Zerosian resistance was so fierce, so refusing to be commanded, that the city was effectively destroyed in the struggle. But history has a way of repeating itself. After Senntisten fell, the Saradominists moved in. They didn't just clear the rubble, they tried to pave over the memory of Zaros. They erected a magnificent new city called Saranthium in Saradomin's honor. Like modern-day Falador, Sarinthium was a sea of white stone and Saradominus symbols. You can still see the evidence today in the museum. His icons are scattered across the pots, jugs, and coins pulled from the upper layers of the soil. Sarinthium was supposed to be a masterpiece of the Third Age, but its success was its undoing. Its vibrancy attracted the wrath of Zamorak, and the city was obliterated before it was even finished. Underneath the Saradominist ruins, the Zerosian temple still hummed with power. Rather than cleansing them, Saradomin simply ordered his followers to bury the darkness under the earth and rubble. The city did not vanquish instantly. There is evidence which suggests Saranthium survived into the early Fourth Age. It was even the hometown of the legendary heroine Camora Shazian. Today, when you use the winch to descend into the dig site dungeon, you are travelling back in time. You pass through the layer of Saranthium's failed glory and into the heart of the ancient Zerosian temple. When you find a Zerosian artifact and show it to the archaeological expert Terry Belando, he admits that he has never heard the name Zaros. The smashing joke is the final victory of the Third Age gods. They buried the truth so deep that even the world's leading scholars can only see the broken dishes of a history they've been taught to forget. Chapter 2: The Desecrated Capital. When you navigate the endless rooftops of Mayadich, the game describes the houses as nothing more than a derelict building. But the lore isn't in the houses, no, it's in the debris between them. If you look closely at the rubble, you'll find a broken statue near the entrance of the hallowed sepulchre. There is no examined text, and so to the casual player, it is something easily overlooked. But to those who know the history of the Kingdom of Hallowvale, this is a crime scene. What is left of this statue looks extremely similar to those found within the sepulchre, those which belong to the Icene race, the winged messengers of Saradomin. In the Second Age, the land wasn't a vampire-infested dump. It was a fertile kingdom of forests and farms, ruled by Queen Eferity. It was a place of everlight, where newcomers from the Icene homeworld first arrived. But it was also a land of deep divides. See, Humans here were kind of treated as second-class citizens. Marriage ceremonies were restricted, and even in death, humans and Icene were buried on different levels of the sepulchre. When the God Wars began, Lorennial Drakan invaded. Queen Nefertiti, a master botanist, fought back with the blisterwood trees you still see in the heart of the city, a biological weapon designed to burn vampire blood. But the kingdom fell not to strength, but to bargain, to save her husband. The queen, she surrendered. The tragedy is that Drakan didn't keep his word. He transformed her husband into a monster, the vampire Van Strom Klaus. In a fit of bloodlust, Van Strom murdered his own daughter, Lorena, while his son, Saphalan, the leader of the Myriqui, who you meet in the questline, escaped with a shattered memory. The vampires didn't just conquer this place, they performed a structural erasure. They took the Queen's castle and renamed it Versenhaza. They saw the defection of the kingdom's own protectors. Like Fasani, Justiciar of the Wolf, who felt abandoned by Saradomin and pledged her soul to Drakan. That particular story merits its own video. Stay tuned for that. They forced the surviving humans to take the marble from their own cathedrals and use it to patch the walls of their new slums. Every derelict building in Maradich is a Frankenstein's monster of history, a mix of crude wooden planks and ancient holy stone. You aren't just walking through a slum, you're walking through a civilization that was dismantled and put back together as a prison. Chapter 3: The Parasite of Kourend. Great Kourend is the jewel of the West, but its foundation is built on a dark biological mystery. We go to the Dark Altar to switch our magics or craft blood and soul runes, but the environmental details suggest a much more sinister relationship. If you examine the crystals surrounding the altar, the text describes the purple growths as glowing with dark power. These aren't just minerals. The altar itself is a rudimentary sapient artifact with a history that predates the city of Archaeus by millennia. Hidden within the Karazi jungle of Karamja, this altar was originally sought by Zamorak during the God Wars. He believed this artifact was powerful enough to grant him victory, but the demon Skotizo, sent to retrieve it, betrayed his god. He decimated his own expedition team and fled west with the altar, using its power to summon the horrors that now fill the catacombs of Kourend. In the Grand Library, you find a book called Transvergence Theory by Amon Decot. It explains that the magic of Kourend is fundamentally different from the rest of the world. On the mainland, wizards must teleport to hidden dimensions to craft runes, but in Kourend, the Dark Altar acts as a bridge. The author theorizes that the altar has a sense of self-preservation. It doesn't just provide magic, it has an agenda. It intentionally leeches energy from the true blood and soul plane to create false altars on Kourend. It forces crafters to use dark essence, a material that only it can create, effectively making the entire Archaeus civilization dependent on its existence. Every time you create a dark essence block, the altar physically drains you, consuming 1 prayer point per block. It is an exchange. The altar brings life out of death to reanimate corpses, but it breaks minds and corrupts individuals in the process. From using its power to seal the Wintertodt, or to grant Archaeus citizens their ghostly immortality, the altar has made itself the lifeblood of the continent. But as the Transvergence Theory warns, the altar isn't a servant of the people, it is a parasite that has successfully convinced its hosts that they cannot live without it. Chapter 4: The Laboratory of the Dragonkin. Fossil Island is often treated as an area to train herbivore, or maybe AFK at ammonite crabs, but its unidentified fossils and mutated wildlife tell a story of biological desperation. The quiet detail here begins with the dragonkin, Skeka, who lived in the house on the hill. Skeka wasn't just a researcher, she was a botanist trying to save her dying race. Her old notes, once thought lost to time, reveal that her experiments with the local flora took a dark turn. She documented a symbiotic relationship where fungus inhabits a host creature and describes a violent affair where the island's young were subjected to spore colonies until they passed out, a process she deemed necessary for advancement. The tragedy deepened when another dragonkin, Zorgoth, arrived. According to Skekka's ancient diary, he didn't come for peace, he came to conduct his own experiments on the flora. When Skekka turned him away to prevent him from turning her island to ash, Zorgoth simply moved to the neighbouring island of Lithcrin. From her house, Skekka watched as Zorgoth built a fortress and began dragging creatures inside. Day and night, she heard the shrieks and cries of his experiments. During this time, it is likely that Skekka was breeding the island's unique wyverns and attempting to merge life with what shouldn't be, whereas Zorgoth was nearby twisting the same biology to create weapons of war. A great disaster then occurred. Not an explosion, but a battle that left Lithcrin in ruin and Skekka alone with her creations. However, this time with her creations didn't last. Another note from Skekka reads, "I believe my presence here is causing unrest in the creatures. Whilst at first they kept distance, they are beginning to display violently towards me, no doubt linked to the growing conflicts between their tribes. Perhaps I am a trophy to prove dominance." The herbivores and zygomites that you see today are the living remnants of that era. Biological anomalies left behind when the dragonkin disappeared. You aren't just walking through a forest, you're walking through a laboratory where the experiments outlived their creators, and the fungus finally won. Chapter 5. The Ghost of Forinthry. The wilderness is defined by its danger, but its history is defined by a single moment of silence. Before the God Wars, this wasn't a wasteland, it was Forinthry, a lush green region that served as the metropolitan heart of the Zerosian Empire. According to the museum curator in Varrock, Forinthry was once a great hub of civilization, much like Varrock is today. One of the wilderness's quietest details is hidden in the small obelisks scattered throughout the ash. If you examine them, your character wonders what they do, but upon activation, the game confirms ancient magic teleports you. In Gielinor, ancient magic is a direct synonym for Zerosian. As revealed by the golem encountered during the Desert Treasure 2 quest, Forinthry wasn't just a city, it was a massive Zerosian territory containing powerful settlements. These obelisks are the remains of a public transportation system. They are the skeleton of a city that was once bustling with life. Every time you use one to escape a PKer, you are using the subway system of a ghost empire. Prosperity ended when the Majorat Zamorak betrayed the ancient god Zaros, sparking the God Wars. Forinthry became a perpetual battlefield between the armies of Zamorak and Saradomin. The Great Disaster occurred at the end of the war, when Zamorak, facing a temporary alliance of the other gods, triggered a massive explosion that swept across the continent. He didn't just kill the people, he flash-fried the geography. This act of destruction was so violent that it woke Guthix from his slumber, leading him to banish the gods forever. But the damage was done. The small obelisks and the piles of bricks are all that remain of the most advanced infrastructure of the Second Age. Even the revenants that haunt the region are the spirits of those who died in that blast, forced to wander the ruins of a kingdom that suffered more heavily than any other. When you step into the wilderness, you aren't just entering a PvP zone, you are walking through the charred ribs of a fallen superpower. Chapter 6. The Scorched Memory of Tumeken. In the Kouridian desert, we see only sand and sun, but the history of this land is defined by a god who chose suicide over surrender. A place the adventurer must pass through many times, none the wiser that this wasn't always a desert. It was something much, much more. Before the Second Age, this region was a lush tropical peninsula, a paradise populated by the god Tumeken and his first followers, the Menophites. Together with his wife Elidnis, the goddess of fertility, they raised their children, or rather creations, Icthurin and a mascot. In an empire that stretched across massive green cities like Ulek and Uza, and a unified Menethos, the peace was shattered by the expansionism of the Zerosian Empire. Zaros marched south to claim the peninsula, ushering in a war that threatened to erase the Menophite people. And in a final, desperate act to spare his followers from the Zerosian rule, Tumeken sacrificed himself. He detonated his divine essence, scouring the entire region. The blast vaporized the Zerosian armies and burnt the jungle, turning a tropical heaven into the desert we know today. Now, another discrete example of destruction found within the desert are the ruins of Uza. Long after Tumeken's fall, during the God Wars, Uza became the first civilization in Gielinor to master the creation of golems. If you look around the temple, you'll see massive kilns, once used to bake these clay guardians. They weren't just statues, they were an elite defense created by the descendants of a broken empire. A terrifying demon by the name of Thammaron, an ally of Zamorak, attempted to breach this Saradominist city. His first frontal assault was a humiliating failure. The city's army of golems proved so resilient that they repelled the demonic legion entirely. Driven by tactical desperation, Thammaron retreated to his throne room in the infernal dimensions to hatch a second plan. He used his dark essence to bypass the city's surface defenses, tearing open a portal directly into Uza's undercity. The resulting battle was a bloodbath that leveled the civilization. But the golems didn't go without a fight. An elite squad pursued the demon back through the portal into his own realm, mortally wounding him in his own dimension. The single damaged golem you find today is a survivor of that cross-dimensional counter-strike, left to stand in the sand for thousands of years, while the demon it wounded was left to die in its own realm in the dark. When you re-enter the portal today, you find the skeletal remains of Thammaron, still slumped in his final position, a silent testament to a city that, even in its final moments, ensured its destroyer would never leave the battlefield alive. One additional bit of lore I'd like to add here is that the demon butler that we all know and love today from the construction skill was actually a servant to Thammaron at some stage. Just a little bit of interesting lore. These small details scattered through Gielinor, although seemingly insignificant, help fuel the strong character-rich land the adventurer is privileged to explore today. Chapter 7: The Living City. Prifddinas is often referred to as the most advanced civilization in Gielinor, but the lore hidden in the Grand Library reveals it's actually a life support system. The hidden detail isn't in the architecture, but in a phenomenon known as the Song of Creation, a ritual of sorts by their goddess Seren. Most players think the elves simply worship Seren, but the reality is far more parasitic. The Song of Creation inexplicably tied the souls of every elf to Seren's physical presence. If she leaves them, they don't just lose their god, they will fall ill and die. When the Edicts of Guthix forced other gods to depart, Seren couldn't leave without committing genocide against her own children. Her solution was a violent shattering, exploding herself into a shower of crystals that allowed her to exist everywhere in the forest at once. This tether created a city that is literally alive. Chapter 8: The Fallen Skies of the Camdozaal. The ruins of Camdozaal beneath Ice Mountain are often seen as a free-to-play, low-level training area. But if you look at your spellbook, you'll find the first hidden detail of a stolen identity. To the modern world, this is a dwarven ruin. But to the users of ancient magics, this place is still Lasar. The teleport to this exact coordinate, albeit above the structure built within the mountain, isn't named after the dwarves. It's named after the Zerosian fortress that stood here first. The Camdo dwarves didn't carve these halls, they inherited them. Before the Second Age, these were the barracks of the Zerosian Legion. When the Saradominus general Yonrith Lokavenge, a name you'll recognise from the great houses of Kourend, besieged the fortress, he handed the scraps to the Camdo refugees. An interesting detail is the baronite found within this place, a dark mineral found nowhere else in Gielinor. The tragedy of the Camdo dwarves is that they were too successful. By utilising their unique abilities of smithing with the use of magic, they created artifacts so powerful they drew the attention of the North. During the runecrafting crusades, the Fremennik didn't just attack for land, they attacked because they saw dwarven magic as a blasphemy. Today, one of the most interesting details of Camdozaal is the Sacred Forge. It's a massive, complex piece of machinery that still functions, yet it sits in a city of one. Romano is the only one left to operate it. He sat in the darkness for an entire age, guarding a mineral, a machine, and a city that the rest of the world had forgotten ever existed. Chapter 9. The Secret of the Slayer Masters. We look to Slayer Masters for tasks, a way to gain Slayer XP, but we rarely ask who authorized them to order the deaths of thousands. Bear with me now, because there is extremely limited information in Old School RuneScape, but RuneScape 3 lore allows us to get a deeper understanding. The Order wasn't founded by heroes or gardeners of balance, it was founded by Amascut the Devourer. As I mentioned earlier, after the death of the sun god Tumeken, the desert became a lawless breeding ground for monsters. Amascut, in disguise, gathered 7 founders, and taught them how to defeat various beasts, or as we call it today, Slayer. But this wasn't an act of charity. One of the founders, Catalax, discovered a horrifying truth in Polvanich. Amascut was using the Order to feed. She was in fact absorbing the souls of the monsters the Slayers killed, using them as fuel for her own ascension. When the founders realized that they were being used as a divine buffet, they fled the desert to spread their knowledge, hoping to escape Amascut's reach, but they didn't all make it. While some died, others, like Nakatra, were blessed by the goddess and continued to further her cause. The most disturbing detail is how deep the corruption goes today. The Order successfully recruited non-humans like the fairy Sheldar and the demon Majna to spread their influence, but the lineage remains tainted. When you use your gem to ask for a task, you aren't just training a skill, you are participating in a system designed by a soul-devouring goddess to harvest the essence of Gielinor's monsters. You aren't a hero, no, you are a harvester. Chapter 10. The Anatomy of the Abyss. The Abyss is known to players as a shortcut for runecrafting, a series of rifts created by the Zamorak Magical Institute to bypass the need for talismans. But the often overlooked detail here isn't a secret mechanic, it's the walls themselves. Look closely at the environment. It is disturbingly organic, covered in living eyes, boils, and strange fleshy tendrils. This is because the Abyss isn't a cave, it is the physical body of an unfathomably large Chthonian demon named Hostilius. An entity so massive he once dwarfed the gods themselves. The central hub is believed to be his stomach or heart, but the anatomy of this corpse puppet extends far deeper into the game's map than we originally realized. When you visit the Abyssal Nexus to face the Abyssal Sire, you are standing in what is believed to be the demon's lungs, and if you have travelled to the Scar during the Desert Treasure 2 quest, you've reached the most dangerous part of the body, the brain. This isn't just organic waste, it is a thinking, suffering consciousness that has been languishing between worlds for a very, very long time. Hostilius was once the autocrat of an infernal dimension. Thousands of years ago, he devoured so many of his peers that he grew to an unfathomable size. He was so powerful that he once attempted to outwit Zaros in a legal contract for 12 demonic legions. The Abyss is a prison. During the rebellion led by Zamorak, the Chthonians were overthrown. Those who weren't destroyed were exiled to the Abyss, which is where Hostilius' corpse remains today. Although butchered, it is unknown whether a Chthonian demon can truly die. The abyssal creatures you come across aren't residents, they are scavengers, former subjects even. Ancient scrolls describe them as flies and maggots that arrived after Hostilius was butchered by Zamorak. They moved onto the bloated bulk to cannibalize his dead flesh, hoarding enough power to survive the exile. When you enter the Abyss and feel your prayer drain to zero, it isn't a magical field, it's a biological one. You're being siphoned by a god-sized carcass that is still being picked clean by its own former subjects. We spend hundreds of hours in these places, clicking, grinding, focused on the next level or drop. But Gielinor isn't just a map of skilling locations and boss encounters, no, it's a graveyard of ambitions. Every time you examine a strange rock or walk through a pulsating rift, you are stepping over the remains of a war that most players have forgotten. Next time you're out there, stop looking at your XP gained and start looking at the walls. They've been trying to tell you the truth for a long time. Thanks for watching. If you enjoyed this, be sure to subscribe because there are many, many more just like this around the corner. See you next time.